Welcome back to Inside Games, the only gaming news show brave enough to call Nintendo big, flat, sloppy liars.
Yeah, that's right, Nintendo. You said Chris Pratt was gonna be Mario, but I turned on my crappity old Switch last night. I didn't see Chris Pratt anywhere, just big stupid plumbers.
Shall we begin?
They've also gone to the uncharacteristic step of completely denying recent reports that they're currently developing a 4K capable Switch in the near future.
We don't get Chris Pratt, and we don't get 4K. Nintendo's taking everything from us, Bruce. Nintendo's supposed to be the dream maker, the dream giver. What happened?
They're the worst. There's lots of really weird angles to this story, so we got a lot to go over here. We'll start by talking about the story that just hit, then the history of this rumor, and finally provide a little commentary and analysis on what we think might be going on.
Rumors of a 4K capable Switch, or Switch Pro, or even Super Switch, it's been called a lot of things. They've circulated for over a year at this point, reaffirmed yet again by Bloomberg this week, when Takashi Mochizuki and Olga Karif published a report claiming that 11 developers currently have a 4K capable Switch dev kit.
Yeah, this falls in line with several previous reports from Bloomberg, and Mochizuki specifically, that previously claimed a 4K capable Switch would be releasing holiday of 2021 this year.
Yeah, unlike previous reports though, Nintendo actually responded to this one.
Yeah, that never happens. In an English post on the company's corporate public relations account, Nintendo cites the claim that they are providing 4K developer tools and flatly says, quote, "This report is not true." They also iterate that, quote, "We have no plans for any new model other than the Nintendo Switch OLED model, which will launch on October 8th, 2021.
Oh, that's awfully direct, but also very bizarre, kind of uncharacteristic for Nintendo. Crazy rumors circulate about Nintendo all the time. They almost never really comment on them outside of being asked specific questions by investors in Q&A sessions and stuff like that.
Yeah, so what is the deal here? Why this one? Is the Bloomberg report wrong? Is Nintendo lying? What is Chris Pratt doing right now?
What's he doing right now?
Chris Pratt here.
More importantly, I think at the end of this, for us gamers, Bruce and I gamers, is Nintendo actually working on a 4K Switch at all? Or are they just not doing that? So let's dig in and see what we can figure out.
For starters, is this story believable, or does it seem like a rumor?
Yeah, so from our perspective, this story seems believable. Sourcing employees at 11 different companies should rule out the kind of miscommunication that can lead to overblown rumors or wildly inaccurate reports.
Or how would that many different people all say the same thing unless it were true?
Although it is a little fishy, a little strange that the only company that's actually named in the article, and that's Zynga, they also put out a statement saying they definitely didn't have a 4K dev kit.
Apart from that, the only fishy aspect of this story is that Bloomberg reporter Takashi Mochizuki is largely the only reporter driving all the stories about a 4K capable Switch.
The only other corroboration of these events that we've seen has come from VentureBeat reporter Jeff Grubb. When asked about the rumors on Twitter back in July, he responded, quote, "I still have only ever personally heard 2022 for a Switch Pro. And if that still happens, I'll continue to speculate that it will have 4K output with significantly more efficient chip with DLSS."
That would contradict Mochizuki's previous report in March 2021, which claimed that the 4K capable Switch would release holiday of 2021.
Bloomberg's latest reports offers a pretty simple explanation for that one, though. COVID! Yes, of course, it's always COVID. Apparently component shortages caused Nintendo to delay the release of the upgraded console, according to, quote, executives at component suppliers to Nintendo who asked not to be identified.
Mochizuki's sources in component manufacturing have been reliable in the past, as they also revealed the new OLED screen in March, long before Nintendo announced the new model in July.
Yeah, I remember some of those reports thought that the new screen was going to go in the 4K model, and then later it just turned out that those were separate, or it got a little interesting. Mochizuki also reported way back in September 2020 that Nintendo asked developers at the time to make their games 4K ready. So, if all of those reports are true, and they have been in the past, some of them, why would Nintendo ask developers to make 4K games back in September 2020 if it's a whole year later and now they, quote, have no plans for any new model?
Yeah, now it seems Nintendo is flat out denying they have sent 4K capable dev kits to anybody ever. That's weird.
Yeah, that's what makes this whole situation so bizarre. We have a seemingly reliable report from a reporter whose sources have been accurate in the past, while the company itself is just flat out saying it's untrue.
Yeah, so who do we believe? Where is Chris Pratt Schwarzenegger when we need him the most?
Mr. Roboto,
All we can do here is offer some possible scenarios and maybe some suggestions about what could be going on, things that make the most sense from everyone's perspective.
So for starters, let's assume Nintendo is telling the truth, and there is no 4K Switch, and they have no plans to make one ever.
So to start with, where did all the rumors come from in the first place, if apparently they're not real? Unless we assume that Mochizuki is just making all of this up for the sheer thrill of it. The only way it kind of makes sense, this report about 11 different companies, as if there is some kind of wide-scale communication error between Nintendo and all of their partners.
Maybe Nintendo provided a dev kit capable of outputting 4K just as a future-proof move. Well, they never intended to make a 4K Switch, but the dev kit supports it just because.
Maybe, I don't know. Doesn't really make sense either, you know, but again, if we believe Mochizuki's previous report that Nintendo actually told developers to start making 4K assets in late 2020, that doesn't make any sense.
To be honest, it's very difficult to come up with a scenario in which Nintendo actually doesn't have any 4K dev kits in the wild, and yet 11 different developers said they have them somehow. Unless this report is hearsay, obviously. Like, one person said they heard from 11 developers, and that's what the article Mochizuki is sourcing. And that would be bad journalism on Mochizuki's part. And I don't know that he's a bad journalist.
That's the kind of thing that ostensibly destroys a career. That's like one of the cardinal sins. You don't report on hearsay. It's the only thing that would maybe make both sides right at the same time, but I don't think that's the case either, especially given that the previous report has been accurate. So the only other possible explanation here is that Nintendo does have 4K dev kits out, and they're just straight up saying they don't instead.
Yeah, but Lawrence, why would they do that?
I don't know. Well, and like, why would they specifically say it instead of just ignoring it, which is what I would assume they would do? Maybe, if we think about it purely from our perspective, which is not typically how Nintendo makes their decisions ever, but for the sake of this, if I'm just thinking about it,
consumer perspective.
Exactly. I'm Johnny $60, and I'm trying to decide which game to buy.
Yeah.
Maybe Nintendo doesn't want to implicitly imply that a 4K Switch is coming because it might discourage purchases of the moderately upgraded OLED model coming out in a week. So I might have my $350 on that. If I hear a 4K Switch is real and maybe coming out next year, I might just cancel that pre-order.
It's also possible they're legally obligated to deny it, even if it is true, because of the rumored hardware collaboration involved. Now, I don't really understand this part, Lawrence. I'm curious to see what you think of this.
I don't either. This is just the only thing I can come up with that might explain why they actually said something out loud. So, if Nintendo were to confirm the existence of a 4K Switch, it would also be confirming an extension of their manufacturing partnership with NVIDIA. NVIDIA makes DLSS technology, which is the AI up-resing technique that a Nintendo Switch Pro would ostensibly use to hit 4K. NVIDIA themselves, they've been in some weird corners in terms of hardware manufacturing lately. Cryptocurrency mining has really stretched all their GPU manufacturing. Their stock has blown up in the past 9 months. So maybe because of their positioning in the market, NVIDIA and Nintendo have to be very cagey about where they're talking about they're producing hardware or not. And if they accidentally maybe imply a certain manufacturing agreement before it exists or something like that, it could lead to insider trading charges or maybe investors getting pissed off. I don't know. I know that sometimes companies are legally obligated to deny certain things or protect certain information when it may not factually be true. Because I'm just saying there might be some eventuality there. I don't know.
Maybe there's an understanding between NVIDIA and Nintendo, but no agreement yet. Nothing signed. So they have to say, no, we're not making it because they're actually not making it. But they have an understanding with NVIDIA that they're like, if we can get developers to make 4K stuff and it turns out good, well, then we will sign your agreement and partner. Maybe they just haven't done it yet. We are well out of our lane. We're just throwing stuff out. So ultimately it just seems uncharacteristic that Nintendo denied this specific rumor instead of just ignoring it. So there's gotta be a reason.
If that is the case, then it basically implies a narrative where COVID shortages have pushed Nintendo's hardware production plans back and put them in this awkward territory of having to deny the thing that they can't make yet, even though they totally intended to a year and a half ago. That sort of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think it does. Nintendo's often accused of constraining supply to drive up demand, but often the real answer is that Nintendo just moves tons more units than most people give them credit for. We've got plenty of numbers to back that up.
Yeah, so this is just for holiday 2020. The Nintendo Switch sold 11.57 million units in holiday 2020. That's compared to the PS5's 4.5 million and the Series X's supposed 3.5 million. Xbox didn't really announce numbers, so that's a guess.
They more than doubled PlayStation 5 and Series X. Can you imagine how rough it would be if Nintendo tried to launch a 4K Switch this holiday when they can't even make up enough normal Switches? And that's not even the OLED model.
Yeah, they can't catch up to market demand right now in manufacturing. And that leaves no manufacturing overhead to make another more powerful more expensive version of the Switch that they're already selling out of.
Yeah, and thinking about it from that perspective kind of flips it around. Instead of COVID preventing them from making the 4K Switch they plan to, maybe COVID boosted the sales of their original Switch, which it totally did, so much that they didn't need to make a 4K Switch anymore.
That seems like it's the most viable. And also given how Nintendo, they push against technological advancement as long as they can because it maximizes the profit margin. So that feels a little more right. To back that up a little bit, you just have to look at the numbers. Switch sales absolutely exploded during the pandemic, and they were already growing really fast to begin with.
Sales went from 15 million in fiscal 2017 to 17 million in 2018, 21 million in 2019, and then 28.8 million in fiscal 2020. A 4K Switch is something you release when sales are starting to drop. But sales are nowhere close to that. Nintendo sales are just accelerating. They're exploding.
Yeah, and this is out of all of the current report, that's the part that's most confusing. The Bloomberg report claims that Nintendo will be at a disadvantage this holiday if it doesn't have 4K output, but Nintendo Switch's sales have been just ludicrous, indicating pretty heavily that 4K is not really necessary to move consoles in the market these days.
So here are the numbers to prove it. Sony's PlayStation 5, a console that touts next-gen 4K experiences, sold 10 million units by July 2021, making it the fastest-selling console Sony's ever made.
In comparison, how many units did the rickety, busted-ass 1080p on a good day Switch sell in the same amount of time? Same window, 20.75 million units. And that's according to investor data from Nintendo's website.
Yeah, Sony is selling record numbers of PS5s, and Nintendo more than doubled it in the same time frame.
Yeah, we see that 4K doesn't really matter for sales, so and accordingly, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Nintendo to push it if they don't have to. At 1080p, the Nintendo Switch can enjoy a greater supply. Since they're both supply constrained, Nintendo made twice as many, so they sold twice as many. Just greater sales overall than its console competitors in the 4K space.
Thinking about it from that business perspective, why would Nintendo use some of its manufacturing supply in a 4K unit when it's already selling every unit it can by making cheaper, easier to manufacture hardware?
In retrospect, pre-COVID, it seems like a 4K Switch was one of those maybe possibly kinda sort of ideas back in 2019, and that's only if they really needed to goose numbers in 2021. But COVID did that for them. So maybe now they can just kick back and wait until they need it. And it makes more sense too, because they were less supply constrained. So
yeah,
kind of gave them some wind at the back, it seems.
Given that developers apparently started working on 4K software in late 2020, means Nintendo will have plenty of 4K ready games ready to go if they ever decide to make that leap. That's probably not the best if you're a developer and put a bunch of time and effort into making 4K assets for a Switch game that are going unused or won't see the light of day for years.
Which might explain why they're talking to press. That's people don't leak things if they're happy. So if I'm a developer and I made a 4K Switch game and it's just sitting there and Nintendo's not telling me what's going on and I plan to launch this holiday, I might be a little grumbly about it and I might talk to somebody at Bloomberg. So, kind of adds up there a little bit.
And again, thinking from Nintendo's position as a business, their fiscal 2021 already has some planned releases that'll keep numbers up. They got a new hardware SKU with the OLED model, and it's $50 more. Their hardware revenues for fiscal 2021 will probably look great just off of that OLED model.
And on the software side, they've got a Pokemon game, just like every year. The Pokemon remakes. So that's there. Not to mention, adding another tier of Switch Online, that's just kind of free money. They just flip a Switch, old Zelda falls out, and then they make another $500 million.
If a 4K Switch comes out in 2022, Nintendo's got some very strong sales to look forward to. Breath of the Wild 2, Bayonetta 3, Splatoon 3, Pokemon Legends Arceus, not to mention the 4K Switch. If that comes out next year, boy, oh boy. I mean, looking at it from Nintendo's point of view as somebody who's running the business, I'm like, what are we doing? Why would we ever spend more money on another model? Let this thing either peak or taper off and then release the 4K model.
Yeah, and if I were Nintendo, I'd be looking at the Switch and seeing that people are willing to pay more than $300 for it. So let's find a way to sell it for more than $300. That seems like it's what they did. So it's really smart, and they did it really fast. They gave it a new hat. So it's pretty cool. I mean, at the end of all this, though, what I find interesting is, like, for a while there, people were pretty dubious that a Switch could even do 4K, and I feel like that's part of the part of the believability of these rumors too.
Yeah, Eurogamer's Digital Foundry recently investigated the current state of DLSS technology, found a 4K capable Switch is technically viable. Of course it is.
Kind of interesting, because I was a little doubtful too, but yeah, it seems the form factor and the power draw of DLSS right now could work in a Switch handheld unit.
And Nintendo just filed patents for machine learning image conversion, which is the exact technique used by NVIDIA's DLSS to up-res images.
Kind of weird that they're filing for it though. Maybe they had dev kits that used NVIDIA's DLSS, and now they want to use their own implementation so they don't have to license it from NVIDIA, which is maybe why they can't say that they have dev kits out, because it would acknowledge a business partnership that never actually went forward.
Yeah, oh boy, Lawrence, you may have just hit the nail on the head, that one. That's pretty scary for them. Because then they're trying to copy NVIDIA's technology, and they don't want people to know about it until it's in the market. Oh. Yeah. Ooh, boy.
Whatever. Nintendo can do whatever they want. And as long as I get a 4K Zelda, I support it.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so we'll recap it. 11 different developers say they have a 4K dev kit. Technically viable to make. Nintendo's filing patents for it. And yet, Nintendo has no plans for a new model. Lawrence, I'll give you my theory. Here's what I think happened. I think, like you said, sales were going up, but then COVID hit and it exploded. And they're like, well, we don't got to do anything. We were going to release a 4K Switch, and now we don't have to do anything. So they were like, we need to think of a model in between as a model refresh that makes it seem like we were going to do something that wasn't 4K, and that's the OLED model. And the OLED model is now just pushing that 4K model down the road. So it'll be a couple of years from now, probably 2023. I'd be surprised if they release it in 2022. But I think that's just pushing it down the road because COVID boosted their sales so much that they don't need anything anymore. That's my theory.
COVID's taken so much from us, Bruce.
Not 4K as well.
I could have played Breath of the Wild 2 in 4K.